But otherwise, we can probably go ahead and get started with some introductions, and we'll end with Kevin and Fred kind of introducing themselves as they do their presentation, which I'm really excited about. This is actually a two-part online workshops here. We've got this one this month with Kevin and Fred, and then next month I'm really excited about Ghazala coming on from I think it's GFS Events.
It is.
And
yep.
She has figured out as an event planner this whole transitioning to online events, and has been very successful in her fundraising events. So I'm really excited to have her next month, as well as what we're doing now. And I think that, you know, there's this transition that's going to be occurring, and how much we're going to be doing of online events and how much we're going to be doing of in-person events, and really rethinking what that looks like for fundraising in nonprofit organizations. So my name is Linda Akey. I'm a nonprofit consultant. I help new nonprofits get their tax exempt status. I write the 1023 applications, but I also do strategic planning and board development and operations, program and fundraising development, just kind of everything involved with starting up a brand new nonprofit. I've helped over 150 organizations get their tax exempt status, but hundreds of others in other ways. I do workshops and training, and I was co-founder of the Northern Colorado Nonprofit Resource Center, where we served over 3,000 501c3 and other tax-exempt nonprofit organizations in Northern Colorado before I moved out here. And the work of that resource center has now been taken over by the library district and continues to this day. So it's really nice to know that they're still getting the resources they want. And so I know we're small but mighty, but I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's experience and learning about what Kevin and Fred have to share. So Jason, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jason Lang. I moved to Seattle just in time for the pandemic, and it's made my job search really interesting. So I'm networking and reaching out to people, and hopefully one of these days I'll land a paid position. I currently serve on the board of the Beacon Food Forest.
And Tamara?
You would pick me next. Hi, I'm Tamara, and I'm just starting up a nonprofit. My son was killed in 2018. So I'm just trying to learn all the aspects of a business, how to run a business, the business taxes, just trying to just learn as much as I can so I can take that forward with me.
What's your nonprofit's focus?
Like, I'm mostly just doing the support for mothers who have lost children to gun violence. Because right now it's a support, but it's just.
Gotcha.
Excellent. And I don't know if James is available to say hi or not. James, are you in your other meeting? I think he might be. Okay. Well.
Oh, Linda,
you just muted yourself there.
I want to thank you again, and we are recording this so that it can be available to all of our other members in the future. And now I'd like to turn it over to Kevin and Fred and let them introduce themselves and move forward with the topic. Hopefully both of them have access to share their slides. Let me know if that's not true. But all right, sounds good. Well, Kevin, why don't you take it over?
Yeah, thank you for having us. So we really appreciate it. Fred and I put together a presentation. I'll kind of run the slides here and contribute as well as Fred. So why don't I start screen sharing here and we can get things going. So we really wanted to talk about events from the standpoint of virtual to hybrid events for nonprofits is really our focus. Fred and I are both well acquainted with delivering virtual events, as well as creating events around that. Fred and I have known each other for, I don't know, probably over a decade now, and have done multiple projects together, from events to content creation. So I'll let Fred kind of introduce himself and go from there.
Yeah. So firstly, yes, thank you so much for having us. And I'm excited to hear what you learned from Gazala too, because Gazala and I just did a virtual fundraiser together. And she and I have been working together for many years pre-COVID on, you know, a multitude of in-person events. So, you know, pre-COVID, I was an auctioneer. I also have 3 auctioneers who work with me that I send out, and I consult on all of those events. And so pre-COVID, I was doing somewhere between 80 and 100 events a year myself, and then my team was doing a lot more. And that's a lot in the Seattle area, and also a lot in New York City and Boston and Atlanta and LA and San Francisco and Bend and Sun Valley, and just kind of all over. But prior to that, my background was in film and television production, which is one of the ways that I initially met Kevin. And so it was kind of fortuitous when this happened, and we were kind of forced to move from taking things which had been done in person and basically taking a play and making it a TV show. And so it's been incredibly busy. There were weeks in October, November when I was doing at least 5 virtual events a week, and sometimes 7 or 8. Frequently 2 in a day, like one for an East Coast live stream. And these are what I've been doing, with the few exceptions, are truly live virtual events where we're, you know, live streaming from a studio of some kind, typically over YouTube, and then delivering that to people who are watching at home on their laptops or their phone or their big screen TV, you know, if they've got a smart TV. So yeah, so I've been working, you know, I've done at least 75 or 80 of those for everyone from MoHi, Seattle Symphony, Seattle Children's Hospital. You know, the list goes on, and a ton of different schools, St. Thomas School and Lakeside School, and Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, Muscular Dystrophy Association, Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center. The list goes on and on. And so now I'm primarily, you know, as you can imagine, working with my organizations to figure out what's next and what are fundraisers in the fall going to look like, what are fundraisers in 2022 going to look like, and for different groups there are different answers. And so we'll obviously talk a little bit more about that later, but I have some events in the fall that are staying fully virtual. I have some events in the fall that are hoping to return to entirely in person with no virtual component. And I have mini groups in the fall you have mini groups in the fall that are expecting to do a hybrid where there are some bidders in the room competing against some bidders that are out of the room. And then this summer, even for the Auction of Washington Wines, we're doing one where bidders in a room with me, and then bidders in another room, and you know, we're with multiple auctioneers at multiple locations. So it can be as complicated as people want, but that's an overview of who I am.
Thanks, Fred. So my name's Kevin Maude. My background has really been past 25 years. I've been an entrepreneur, developing a lot of different businesses, focused mostly around video and media delivery one way or another. I have one business called B47 Studios. My latest venture is called Social Video, and Social Video is really about focusing on delivering video content that tells the customer, or tells the story of the business through the customer's experience. And that also relates to virtual events. My background in virtual events really stems from being able to deliver a lot of corporate content or corporate event focus, as well as nonprofit events. And a lot of that, I've delivered stuff from small meetings all the way up to the presidential inauguration. So I've seen a lot of different happenings and a lot of different experiences around that. So I bring that to the table and continue to figure out ways to deliver new and innovative ways of doing that. So just to get started here, what we really saw in pre-COVID times, a lot of events, we feel that were kind of getting boring to some extent. A lot of people were focused about what's in the room and just getting money from people. And the in-person experience really needed a lot of energy and focused energy to be able to build connections within the room, but that wasn't necessarily happening. And then COVID gave us the opportunity to develop some innovative ways of delivering it online. Fred, you have anything else you want to kind of add to that?
Yeah, and I would say that people pre-COVID would always say to me, "Are people tired of events, of fundraising events?" And I would always say, I think people are tired of boring fundraising events. Just like I don't want to sit through a 2-hour movie if it's terrible. But that's not a knock against movies in general. It just means that we need to continue to innovate and make them really meaningful and make them really fun and make them not drag on and on and on, but give, So, I mean, I still pre-COVID love events and was advocating for events, but I was wanting to make sure that my events were not just a cookie cutter. I think when I first started, you could drop a different banner behind me and it could be any charity, So really trying to move away from that and move into events that felt really authentic to the nonprofits, but without blowing up the budget at the same time.
So with COVID events, there was a lot of restrictions that were put on capabilities of delivering events. So that kind of drove a lot of people to move towards a virtual event environment, which meant that it gave the opportunity to figure out new ways of doing that and delivering that. And some of that was forced because of restrictions of travel, for sure. A lot of people weren't able to get out, get and see each other, be able to gather, and also budgets. Budgets were restricted, and given that they weren't able to generate as much revenue, they were now cutting back on budgets. So that forced the innovation and creativity of people in delivering events. And I think Fred was referencing that now is an opportunity to really figure out how to deliver events that aren't boring. But it also introduced some new elements that you had to overcome. And I think some of those were people being at home, which meant that people were distracted by other elements. Now they had multiple screens they were looking at. They weren't necessarily in a room that had a dedicated focus to the stage. Some of them also lacked energy in terms of, okay, we're just going to try to do a fundraising event through Zoom. And that didn't necessarily always work out as well. Fred, you want to add some to that?
Yeah, I mean, the certainly like some of the challenges of these events. I mean, one was that for most people, I mean, my background is in live television and I worked at Saturday Night Live, and, live TV wasn't intimidating to me, but for many people, it was brand new, so that was obviously a big hurdle, is just trying to even understand, when I say, hey, there's a lower third on the screen that you're looking at. Do you know what a lower third is? Do you know how to create that element? All of that. But then separate from that, in addition to people being distracted, there's less accountability. If I invite you to my table at a Fred Hutch event, that's a big deal. You're getting a dress, you are getting a babysitter, maybe you're like Ubering down to the Sheraton, like there's some accountability. You can picture a 10 top table that's missing 2 people. And so you're not going to miss that event. Whereas for a virtual event, it's easy to miss. And so we had to kind of figure out ways to build up the accountability for people. And then there were obviously some opportunities that we can talk about too. Namely that in a ballroom, there are also distractions. And if people are seated at round tables, half of them have their back to the stage. And, in a virtual environment, if somebody's watching a fundraising video full frame on their laptop and they're sitting a few feet from it, it can be very immersive. They can be right there in front of the program in a way that they weren't before. You know, there are opportunities around cost savings. I did Make-A-Wish here in Seattle, and Make-A-Wish did about 1.2 million in the room pre-COVID, and then our first virtual event, we've got another one coming up, but our first virtual event, we did 1.3 million online. So, and in 1 hour, you know, in significantly less time. So, you know, and their expenses were so much less because they weren't feeding 600 people in a ballroom, that their net was even greater. So, you know, there are some advantages. And then certainly, I mean, one other advantage that we'll talk about as we're moving on to opportunities now is, you know, if you're a school, you can have your alums watching from all over the country. You can have families that might otherwise be shy or intimidated by displays of wealth or something, who might otherwise not attend a fundraiser. You can have them attend as well. So, yeah, so we can talk, you know, we can talk more about those opportunities as we jump to the slide.
And I think one of the other big things is now you're able to unite, or like Fred mentioned, unite a community. Now you're able to bring in people from remote locations that you might not have been able to either afford or be able to have access to as speakers, but you're also able to promote your accomplishments a lot easier through video content that might be played back. You're able to also connect with donors that might be a lot further away than Seattle, and they might not be able to attend those in-person experiences.
Yeah, and you're able to connect or to engage with donors who were busy that Saturday, but could watch it the next morning on Sunday with their cup of coffee too. And that's been an interesting thing too. I heard anecdotally from Asian Counseling and Referral Service, who my team helped, that they got an additional $10,000 in gifts from people who watched the live stream the week following the live event. And so I will say that, you know, we have been really advocating for truly live events so that we can engage with people live and thank them live and see their chat comments of like, hi from Sammamish, and say, we've got Sammamish watching, you know, so that it really feels live. Because I've seen that in addition to the fundraising, I've seen that experience has been, at least until now, really meaningful for people, you know, that they want to support you know, their kids' school or whatever, and they've been going to these events, and just getting an email solicitation is not the same. That anything we can do to really just normalize it and make people feel like we're still part of a community that's coming together, and we might be in different places right now, but we're all together live supporting this great organization. And that I have seen has been really emotionally impactful for people, because you see it in the chat. You see so many people just saying, oh my gosh, this is so fun and so great to be here and so great to still be able to support Seattle Children's Hospital or Make-A-Wish or Fair Start or whatever it is, you know.
And I think it also opened up the capabilities for organizations to connect in different ways. So not only, which kind of leads into our next slide here, the types of events. So, you know, a lot of organizations think one way of fundraising, and either through a gala event or fundraising of some sort. But now you also have the opportunity to connect with your donors by showcasing your experts in a certain area, by being able to provide networking opportunities through virtual events, as well as being able to provide insights in your mission that you're trying to accomplish. And that, I think, is a new way of being able to build your donor base, but also being able to build your influence in the community by being able to provide those insights, those communities, those expertise, and showing that you really are living your mission and living to what you're trying to accomplish. Fred, anything else you want to add on that?
No, not at this point. We can continue and we can circle back as we need to.
Great. So, you know, what we kind of did next is broke down, you know, expectations. And maybe, Fred, you want to take this one? Yeah.
So I think, you know, because Kevin and I were talking about just general expectations for an event, and we were talking about how there's like, you know, what do you expect from an event as an audience member is sometimes similar and sometimes different from what does an organization expect. And so just being kind of clear about the expectations. So I think as an audience member attending somebody, you know, especially if I'm new to this organization, but even if I'm not, I mean, first and foremost, I want to understand what is the impact that this organization is making, and what is the urgent need, and then how am I fueling that need. And so I think it's important for all of us to remember that donors think of themselves as being the people that fuel the organization. And so, you know, there's a lot of, you know, advice online about how to tell your story, but it usually starts with cutting yourself out of the narrative and making the donor be the person who's in the driver's seat. And so my mantra is that organizations don't have needs, people have needs. And so when you're giving money to Seattle Children's for uncompensated care, you're not giving money to Seattle Children's, you're giving money so that a family who otherwise would be turned away can get the care they need for their child. And so it's people giving money to people. So I think people want to understand, what is the need? Who are the people that I'm helping? And then separate from that, you know, that obviously dovetails with the emotional connection that you have to the story that you're hearing. And then, you know, that going larger is like being part of a community, being part of something that's bigger than yourself, and being kind of surrounded by philanthropy, you know, is really uplifting and inspiring. I think you know, people, you don't leave a fundraiser in a bad mood. You should leave a fundraiser in a great mood, because you've changed lives for the better. And so to that end, you know, it has to be fun, and it has to be fun both in the kind of storytelling around the work we're doing, but it also just has to be fun. And early on, I was doing a fundraiser for Susan G. Komen for the Cure. It was one of my first events, and you know, we're talking about cancer, and somebody was there who's with the speaker had lost his wife to breast cancer, and you know, a week beforehand we were having a meeting, and the executive director said, "All right, Fred, we hired you because we want this to be really fun." I thought, wow, okay, that's really telling. But it's true, nobody wants to go to an event that isn't fun, and they're certainly not going to come back. And you know, whenever somebody tells me, "Oh, we're having trouble filling our tables," I always say, well, my chances are last year's event wasn't that fun, because if it was super fun, it's a lot easier to fill tables. It's a lot easier to find sponsors. It's a lot easier to get table captains lined up. It's a lot easier to get people to come back. So having it be fun, feeling that connection, feeling like you're part of a community, and then providing obviously the information that they need so that they really feel like they are making an impact on a world that's bigger than themselves, is key.
And then from organizational standpoint, there's definitely expectations of an event that you know, the organization is trying to hit. They definitely have goals, and I think it's super important to kind of establish those goals from the onset, and know where you're working towards. One of the conversations Fred and I were having as we developed this was about, you know, is the event about raising funds, or is it about engaging your community, and really ranking how each of those goals are, because that'll help inform your decisions and how you might perceive something. And the example that Fred and I were talking about was just a raffle. So if you're trying to raise money, you might have a higher price point than if you're trying to engage a community that just you're looking to engage. You might have a lower price point so that they feel like they're part of it.
Yeah, raffle price, ticket price too. You know, like, you know, I do Queen Anne Elementary School's pre-COVID auction. They made the decision that they would be free to attend, because they wanted it to be open to everyone in the school community, you know? And so that's a decision where you're putting community building over fundraising. But, you know, I definitely run into trouble with groups where they say it's both, it's 50-50, because I'm like, well, this is going to affect a lot of things. So we really have to pick, you know, because, you know, it's going to affect, it's going to affect a lot of things, you know, the price point, of your auction items. I mean, there's a lot. So, So with that, yeah.
I think the other element to also bring up in there is the emotional connection. You know, establishing the connection with your donor base, that there's an emotional connection, good, bad, or indifferent. You having having an emotional connection, you end up having a stronger relationship, and that way you can ask your donors of a higher degree. You can also engage them in new ways, in different ways, because they feel connected, and being connected on an emotional level is much deeper than just a substantive level in terms of being able to deliver, you know, funds or something of that nature.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you know, obviously organizations want to tell their story. They want to connect with their donors. They want to educate their donors. They want to create new donors and new ambassadors, you know, to go out there and tell everyone. And I think they also want it to have fun, because they want everyone out there talking about their event and how much fun it was. You know, I did an event for Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center, and it was, you know, we raised $12 million. So it was a giant event. And, but we were selling tickets to Wimbledon, and we had a bit set up where we knew it was going to happen, but nobody did, where John McEnroe showed up and came out and started yelling at me and all of this. And the crowd went nuts. And I heard from a different big fundraiser that they had just had a dinner for some of their major donors, and that the entire topic of conversation was the Fred Hutch event and how much fun they had and how crazy it was that John McEnroe showed up and started yelling. And then he said, I'm going to take you down onto Wimbledon. We're going to hit some balls together. I mean, it was just like, it was full of surprises, and you know, you don't need John Wimbledon to have just kind of fun moments like that you've planned out for your donors. So, you know, you want everyone talking about it. And even if it's a quiet or smaller event, you still want people saying like, oh my gosh, I just went to this fundraiser for an organization that does blank. You know, you want people out there talking to their friends and family. All right, let's keep going here. And we talked about that, like the goals. You know, there's a monetary goal. You want to communicate your mission and your goals. You want to build community and like cultivate your donors, you know, deepen your relationship with your existing donors, and again, have a lot of fun. So let's talk about virtual fundraising. So would it be helpful? I mean, I guess my goal here was to talk a little bit about what I've been doing over the last 6 months, because as we get into hybrid events, that'll be a factor. But just kind of elements to consider as we're doing fundraisers.
Yeah, I think it'd be really good to get some of the virtual ideas. I think virtual events will continue.
Yeah, me too.
As we move forward, and I think there will be hybrid events, and I think there will be in-person events.
Yes, and I'm planning all three right now.
Yeah, definitely curious about all of that. So what you've been doing and the successes you've already had this last year sound really amazing. So
yeah, I mean, I stopped counting at like 70 virtual events. I mean, it's been a lot. So, and that's just over the last 6 months. So the first thing in virtual fundraising, which is true pre-COVID and is true now, is that if nobody's in the room, then you're in trouble. And if nobody's in the room who has the capacity to give, then you're in trouble. And so, you know, that's certainly one thing I've been telling organizations, is that they need to get people to our virtual fundraiser, and that it's going to be just as big a challenge as it is to get them to any sort of regular fundraiser. So what I've been suggesting to that end is that people have virtual table captains, and that, you know, if you have 25 people who each commit to bringing 10 guests, well, then that's 250 people right there. And that those virtual table captains do something, you know, speaking of the accountability like we did earlier, that those virtual table captains are doing things like hosting their own Zoom happy hour, you know, from 6:30 to 7 before the 7 o'clock live broadcast, something like that, just so that you get that accountability. Those virtual table captains are checking in with their friends 1 week before the event, that they're texting their friends the morning of the event, and that they're, you know, that they're making sure that their guests attend just like you would pre-COVID. The events that I've seen struggle are the events where they think, oh, we can just post on Facebook that we're having an event and people will show up, you know, and that's certainly not true, especially when you're competing against the weather and everything else. And then one thing Kevin and I talked about is like in our backgrounds in television, you always think about what's the lead in to your show. And so, you know, if you're an 8:30 p.m. sitcom, the 8 o'clock sitcom hands over an audience to you. And that's how you know, have success. And so same thing, you know, having these virtual table captains, these virtual, these like pre-event, you know, Zoom get-togethers, you know, where again, you're just kind of getting that accountability. And the other nice thing, of course, is that you're getting 10 people to attend. You know, I certainly emphasize like start with your friends who have the capacity to give, who understand the mission of this organization and can make a, you know, a significant gift, depending on what the organization is. That might be $500 or $5,000. And then, but once you've got those people locked in, you can also invite your neighbors and your friends and everyone else. I mean, your virtual table can be 25 or 30 people, but without those virtual table captains, you're in trouble. The second question, of course, is just how are we delivering the program? Are we doing it over Zoom? Are we doing it over YouTube? You can see here, I'm doing a fundraiser for Evergreen School. We're at a studio and we're streaming on YouTube. And so for me, because YouTube is free and because there are different studios in town, I have found that that's the best quality experience for people, where everyone is having the exact same experience. They're not on camera. They can watch it just like a TV show. They can have friends over. They're going to get quality audio and all of that. I really do believe that people give money to organizations where they trust the organization, and that if you deliver a kind of janky, sloppily put together fundraiser, that's going to have a big impact on your fundraising. And there are lower cost studios out there, but I've been doing everything from a studio, with only a few exceptions. And then, you know, again, now, as I said earlier, like we're doing TV and not theater. So that's another consideration, is you might have a person stand up and talk for 5 minutes pre-COVID at an event. But that doesn't work in this virtual fundraising world. I really believe that we need visuals. If you're watching 60 Minutes tell a story about a nonprofit, you're gonna have a lot of images, not just a talking head. And so thinking about those images and strategically, you know, just thinking like a visual storyteller. If you're a school and kids are finally coming back, like I would take a picture of an empty classroom, and start the program by saying, like, here's an empty classroom. This is what we've been looking at our school for the past 9 months. And it's been really hard on all of us. And now kids are starting to show up, and, you know, you see pictures of kids being dropped off. Finally, the playgrounds have kids, and we see pictures of the playgrounds with kids on them. Like, just thinking, how can I tell this story visually to keep people engaged, I think is really important. You know, another thing that I really believe is important is just making it feel live and keeping people engaged. And so that might be, I always ask people, like, you know, where are you watching from, or what's your connection to this organization? Or I just did an animal shelter, Homeward Pet, this past weekend. I was like, who are your animals watching with you? You know, have them say hi in the chat. All of that is fun. I like giveaways. Like here we're using Greater Giving, the auction software Greater Giving. And I've been doing things like where everyone who registers to donate, whether or not you donate, everyone who registers is entered into a drawing for a $50 gift card, or, you know, swag from the organization. Just things like that where you're engaging live with people. And then here again, we're using Greater Giving, and this is the Raise the Paddle segment for this school, where as people give live, the name appears next to the thermometer live. And I'm able to say, and there's Phil joining us. Thank you so much, Phil. All of these gifts are happening live right now. This is a community coming together. We've had people give $25 and people give $2,500. We're just so grateful that everybody is coming together live right now to support the kids at this school. That kind of stuff is really engaging to have it be live. And then the other thing, I would say the two biggest things I emphasize in the virtual fundraising world are, number one, having virtual table captains or classroom parents or whatever it is that's going to get the audience. And number two, pre-event fundraising. That the events that I see that are the most successful really use the virtual event as a line in the sand, but it's in large part just a thank you to donors and a way to make donors feel good about the gifts that they've already given. But and then to like engage new donors, certainly. But the groups that I've been working with, I've been giving them the goal of raising 80% of their raise the paddle in advance of the event. And so if they want to raise $100,000 in their raise the paddle, I've been saying get $80,000 before we even show up for the event, of people that you know are going to give. And if they're not going to attend, then you can, raise the paddle for them virtually behind the scenes. So we see their name appear on that thermometer there. But the groups that go in where they're like, we haven't talked to any of our donors, they're also struggling. Because it's a little bit more anonymous. Even with the names popping up, it's pretty easy for your $5,000 donors to take a year off and just give you 500, unless you've talked to them in advance and made that direct ask. So groups who can, certainly, public schools where they don't have a development team, they largely can't do that. But any nonprofit with an executive director or a development person who's in charge of fundraising, I've been challenging them to raise money in advance. Pre-COVID, I was saying to raise 60% in advance. In COVID, I'm telling people to raise 80% in advance. And then, one other thing which we already mentioned is just, again, the opportunity to really expand the audience and to, engage with donors who have stopped attending, engage with donors who are introverted and don't like going to big events, engage with donors who don't have the capacity to give a lot. I did a school and we were raising money for financial aid, and there was a mom in the chat saying, I can't believe I'm watching everyone be so generous. We are a financial aid family and you're supporting our family, and thank you so much. And then she gave $50, and which was very meaningful for her to do, and it was really nice. So you're not only targeting your high wealth donors anymore, although you certainly need to make sure you focus there, because that will be where most of the money comes in. But a lot of the events I did early on in COVID, half of the donations that came in, not half of the big ones, but half of the donations that came in were brand new donors who had never been to one of these fundraisers before. Anything else I should mention, or any questions on anything I've said right there?
Fred, you might talk about how the experience you've had with pre-recorded content and the mix pre-recorded and live. I know you recommend trying to do as much live as possible, but
well, I would say that I'm live. So I mean that I like having me be live. I would say that for most, obviously the rules are changing now that we're all getting vaccinated. But for most of the events I've done, I am the only thing that's live, or my co-host and I are the only thing that's live, and everything else has been pre-recorded. So if the head of school is welcoming everyone, or if we're now going to hear from the board president, or this person is going to make an ask, all of that has been pre-recorded. And the nice thing about that is I can layer images on top of what they say. So I'm an editor too, and so I can, if it's a pet shelter and they're saying, well, now's the time to help adopt our puppies and our kittens, I can show pictures of puppies and kittens and perfectly time it, and I can add some music underneath and all those things. It also takes away the pressure of having to speak live for those people. Some people really like being able to do 3 takes and pick the best one. And so I'm live. I like the energy of me being live, but there are some nice things about, like I did a fundraiser for Fair Start, and at every level, they had a 20-second, at most, 15 to 20-second video from a different Fair Start supporter about why they love Fair Start. And we would never do that pre-COVID, like, have to run around with a microphone and have someone stand up, and those testimonials would probably end up going to 60 seconds, and it would, but to be able to just kind of insert these little hits and see a real diverse group of supporters who all approach Fair Start from different perspectives was really cool, and a good use of the medium. And those were pre-recorded, and you got to see people in their homes. So I would say that I'm a big fan of me being live, but I don't require or necessarily suggest that everyone is live. Although more and more, if I'm doing a school, the head of school is going to be live, or something like that. I would say that's happening more and more as people feel safer being inside a studio with strangers.
So on that, with you being live, are the attendees just watching kind of in a, you know, that webinar perspective, or do they get to, like, are they seeing each other at all, or?
So they're not seeing each. So you know, some people have been using, and Gazala, I know, like, has, and others have been using webinar software. I have not been a fan of that. I have been a fan of, and this is what I love, by the way, about getting different advice, is that, you know, I always say that, like, when you watch the Super Bowl, you've got two different coaches who are both at the Super Bowl. So they're pretty good coaches, but they might be calling the game completely differently, you know, but they're both at the Super Bowl. So, you know, that's how I feel when other people say, well, this auctioneer said this and you're saying that. I'm like, yeah, I'm telling you what I have seen work for me. And so what I have seen work for me is I let people, if they want to see each other, get together on Zoom before the event, but then we send them a YouTube link. They click on YouTube and they are just watching on YouTube. And YouTube is free. YouTube is really good at streaming. They can stream 4K. I mean, it's high quality, and you know, they've got it down. They've got chat. You know, my feeling is like YouTube is really good at streaming, and so let's use them. And it's free. And it automatically archives to that same link. So as soon as the show ends, it still sits there on that same link. So people who show up the next day can still click that same link and watch the program. So the way I've been advocating is that people, that way they can sit at home, or if they've got an Apple TV, they can stream it to, you know, their smart TV and watch it full frame on a big screen. And then I've been suggesting that people use 2 devices. So my start of every show is like, hey, if you've got them, we suggest using 2 screens, one to watch and one to bid. So watch the show full frame on your laptop, sit back on your couch and have some wine, and then grab your phone and go to Greater Giving. And that's, if you want to bid in the live auction, that's where you're going to bid. And when it's time to donate, that's where you're going to donate. So that's been the system that I've advocated for. And a lot of people have tried to do single screen experiences where you're watching on the same screen as you're donating. I have had really no error, and I've actually found it's easier to people if their laptop becomes their television and they can go full frame and sit back and watch, and then just pull out their phone to give. As long as you have, you know, giving software that's looks great on the web, you know, and
Yeah.
on a
I think that giving software piece is really important. And it sounds to me like, just as you're doing with a in-person event, with a virtual event, you're doing a lot of pre-planning, particularly when you're going out to get videos in advance that you're going to plug into that virtual event, and getting the participation of table captains and things like that. You're doing a lot of pre-planning, just like you're doing in an in-person event.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, the fun thing about virtual events is you know, if you're at a studio that's knows what they're doing and you have a script, like I've developed a script template that has very clear, like, this is when this slide is on screen, this is when this video plays, this is the script that I'm saying. And then I work at studios that have teleprompters, so that I'm staying pretty much verbatim on the script that I've been hammering on for weeks with the organization. The nice thing is, once you're in there, you're just kind of executing on a plan, and there aren't the unknowns that can happen in a live environment when the entrees aren't ready, and you know, or this speaker is missing when you introduce them, or it's time to do the raffle drawing, and does anyone know where the raffle bowl is? I mean, all those little things, all those little things are gone. So you really can have a really tight, you know, on brand show. And there's no, when I say, hey, please welcome Linda, there's no waiting for you to walk to the podium. It's just like, boom, you're talking. And as soon as you're like, back to you, Fred, boom, I'm talking. So, but all of that, yes, is incredibly, you know, there's a lot of detail that goes into planning that. And that's where my background in film and TV production and Kevin's background in film and TV production has been really helpful.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I just wanted to swing back on a couple of points. One is that I think it's really important that nonprofits think about whether or not they're doing a fundraiser versus a public awareness event, and what that distinction is, and what is a fundraiser to them. Because I've worked with organizations where they'll raise, you know, $500 for a fundraising event that they spent, you know, tens of hours on, and that's just not a fundraiser,
For
you know.
sure.
And other times where it's like, you know, you spend $100 for an event and you raise $10,000, that's a fundraiser, you know, and that's
Right.
really what you have to think about. And of course, you are doing some PR in the event. You're sharing information about your organization and things like that. But mixing a true public awareness event versus a fundraiser can actually serve neither purpose when
Right.
you get into it. So I think it's really important that nonprofits think about that. And I was also going to ask you on online silent auctions, um, uh, what are your tips on engagement when you're doing these online silent auction kind of things? Are you doing those in a live event, or are those just, because I'm participating in some that are just kind of online and you don't really know what's going on, and I'm not getting the updates like with
Sure.
Handbid. I used to get updates and stuff. So do you have some tips on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, again, like the software that they choose to use is going to have a big impact on how easy is it to discover items, to log in, to see the items, you know, all of that is pretty obviously critical. But um, in terms of the silent auction, I mean, silent auctions across the board for my events have been generating more revenue, just apples to apples, than last year, because last year people have 1 hour to bid and it's only the 250 people at your event, and they also have a cocktail and they're running into friends. And so over the past year, people have been sitting at home and we've been giving them typically 5 to 7 days to bid on the silent, and, you know, being kind of sneaky and like releasing all of the items, but holding on to one on Monday. And then on Wednesday saying, just added, you know, brand new dinner for, you know, so that you have another email touch point with people. And doing research online about when do people open emails nowadays? You know, is it 8 a.m. and 4 p.m.? Is that when they're most likely to do it? Well, then you probably should send an email at 8 and another email at 4 about something else, you know, an update or a new auction item. And then I have been strongly suggesting that the silent auction close before the live auction starts in the program, or before the paddle raise starts in the program. And because I've done it both ways, and I've seen where you know, for most donors, you want to know how much have you spent in the silent before you raise your paddle. And so just like pre-COVID, we would never keep the silent auction open during the live auction. I've been advocating that people close it. And my favorite way to do it is to close it during the program at a specific time. And that way, just like pre-COVID, I could drum up excitement. So let's say the program starts at 7 and we know that the live auction is going to start at about 7:15, then we might close it at 7:10. And it's been that way the whole time. It's on the website, it's on people's phone. They're getting text reminders. The silent auction closes at 7:10. But that way, when I first kick off the program at 7, I can say, hey, everybody, thank you so much for being here. By being here tonight, you are going to do X, Y, and Z for people. And one way to do that is by bidding. The silent auction is closing in 10 minutes. You know, this is your last chance to bid on this item and that item. You know, and then I'm saying, now let's hear from our executive director. And they talk for 3 minutes. Then we come back. I'm like, all right, now there's 5 minutes left in the silent. And I can get that kind of energy that we had in the room.
That sense of urgency.
That's because that's when people bid. People bid when there's a sense of urgency. So you can create that sense of urgency at 9 p.m. that night after the broadcast, but it's a lot easier if they're watching me, and it's a lot. And I think if you keep it open until 9, your live auction and your paddle raise are going to suffer. So it's a myth that keeping silent auction items open longer is going to make you more money, because I really believe that you're competing with yourself, and that you know, you're making an extra $1,000 in the silent, but you're losing 5,000 in your raise the paddle, you know, because those people aren't going to be giving yet. You know, they're telling themselves, oh, we'll give later, you know, and therefore it affects the energy and the momentum. You're seeing fewer names pop up. And yeah, so that's been one thing that I've been advocating for.
Cool.
And, you know, the events that I've done that have beat their goal have all closed the silent either at 7:10 or 7:15, kind of depending on how much content they have, 10 or 15 minutes into their main program.
So just touching on a couple of the other areas that we felt that virtual events for nonprofits could really work is in that experts and insights. And I think, Linda, you're mentioning kind of the public relation, public awareness campaigns that can be done that way. But, it's just the goal is really walking away to be informed of information, either about a mission or about what has happened. But also establishing the expertise of the organization, and that it's something that people want to be connected with, and that the organization is providing a great value, and that's why they should continue to build that. And I think it's important to offer these kinds of events so that people don't get tired of just being asked to give money through events, but this is a way for them to feel informed and connected, and they can trust the leadership of the organization because they feel that they're actually accomplishing what they've set their mission out to do. And this is a way to showcase that through that capability. Fred, anything else you want to add on that?
No, we should probably get into like what's going to happen like in this hybrid world. But
Sure.
I had another friend whose mom was a big fundraiser around town. And she said to me, people don't just give money to great ideas. They give money to people that are going to execute those great ideas. And so, yes, you want to see that the people running the organization are industry leaders, that they are connected to other industry leaders and thought leaders, that you trust that this is the person I should give $500 to, because they are, that's going to really make a difference in the lives of others. Whereas if somebody gets up and they've got a great idea, but as I said earlier, they're disheveled and they can't really speak about the mission succinctly, and you don't understand what's the urgent need and what's the difference between me giving you 100 or 500. Is there a difference? Like all of those questions. I try to approach every communication with donors with, the reason I'm talking to you today is blank, where it feels like there's a specific and urgent reason why we're talking. So yes, I mean, all of that is so key, even in these in this virtual world. Kevin, do you think we should jump to slide 15 just in the interest of time?
Yeah, because we are running a little bit low on time now. So
yeah, so I guess
15
I'll
more
just
minutes.
I'll say that what I've been seeing in the hybrid world and what I'm planning is, for these truly hybrid events, is what I've been advocating for is having donors in the room with me who are bidding using bid cards. For them, it is a traditional pre-COVID event, but that we are live streaming that to at-home viewers or watch parties, board members hosting small watch parties, that kind of thing, where those people are on their phones. And there's different ways to accomplish that. But the trick with that, of course, is that now you're producing two things. You're producing an in-person event and you're also producing a live stream. And there's some real technical complexity with that. And so I think that that's, for my big organizations, there's a clear return on investment for them, for Seattle Children's and Fred Hutch and places like that. If they spend $15,000 bringing in a live stream company, that is going to pay for itself pretty quickly. They've got donors at home in New York or wherever who can, if 4 of them give $5,000, they've covered their investment, so it's a clear ROI decision. There are others who are live streaming because they've realized that this, especially given conversations around equity and access and inclusion, that this is an opportunity to engage with donors who just would never go to Fred Hutch Gala because it's really intimidating to be in a room with that much wealth, for many people. And so, and you're when you see somebody give $500,000 during the Raise the Paddle, are you going to wait until the $100 level? And so, or is that even embarrassing? Which, we don't want it to be. Obviously, we want everyone to be able to participate. So there are other groups who are ignoring the costs really, and just saying that this is an equity and access and inclusion. This is important to us as an organization, that everyone gets to be a part. Where it's tough is when you're small, you know, if you're a small public school, and you know, it's hard enough to pay for a ballroom and then to add the cost when there's not going to be significant ROI on live streaming. Like those are the ones who are struggling and doing one or the other. In the fall, I have some groups who are just doing virtual still, because it's a safe bet. You know that we'll be able to do virtual no matter what. There's no way that some variant will stop a virtual auction from happening. And it's got really fixed costs. And so what they're doing is they're leaning heavily on watch parties and optimizing watch parties and helping board members organize, you know, what does it look like if you have 8 people? And do you have a smart TV? And can we show you how to show this live stream program on your smart TV, since we're streaming on YouTube? Bigger organizations are all planning on hybrids. And then there have been some groups who are planning on in-person only events. That's at a high level, that's what I'm saying. But I would say that given the events that I do tend to make, you know, over $100,000, I would say, although I do some that are, you know, 20 and 30 and 40. But for bigger events, most people are planning on hybrid events in my world.
I think one other point to bring up there is also, as you're considering investing in, you know, virtual or hybrid events, that media that you're actually creating can be utilized in a number of different ways. So it actually furthering your investment, now you're able to extend that engagement opportunity, because you can leave that up for a period of time and be able to have people donate and give beyond just the live experience. But the other element to consider is that you can then also edit the video down and use that in social media for further engagement, not only for that event, but also for future events. So now you're able to have content that can be used to promote the future event that might be coming up, a bigger event, smaller event, whatever it might be. But it's different ways that you're able to see a return on your investment.
Yeah, I am all for amortizing costs. I actually tonight am doing kindering. And a year ago I did kindering, and Jermaine Kearse, the Seahawk, was the co-chair because his family has used their services. And so they were sending out a camera crew to interview Jermaine. And I was like, well, while they're there, shoot some social media stuff. Shoot like, hey, this is Jermaine, and this week we've got, you know, or this, or hey, it's Jermaine, it's Giving Tuesday. Did you know you can give big today? But, you know, like, you know, if you're paying for a camera crew, shoot some other content too, and you've got it in the can for social media down the road, you know. And I completely agree with Kevin. You can take things, for Fred Hutch, we did a thing called What the Hutch, where they had a researcher who's going around and explaining different kind of new technologies that are a little bit out of the box that they have there. And those became fun little 1-minute segments they could put on Instagram too, you know, completely separate from this live stream. So I agree, amortize costs and plan ahead too, if you're investing in this. Yeah, and I will say that in terms of tools and resources here, Greater Giving is kind of hiding there on the bottom right. I have had the most success at this moment. I mean, I've used all of them, but I've had the most success with Greater Giving, which any of you are welcome to connect with me. I'm just frednorthup.com. We'll put up our information later. But I can kind of explain how I've been doing it. But you know, I've used all of them, and I would say in terms of the technology between their silent auction, I use their silent auction platform for a so-called live auction, and then that thermometer that you saw where you're seeing names popping in live, all of that, I've been able to create the most energy and momentum using Greater Giving so far.
There's a couple other ones I think on here, like Link Room is a new technology that's being worked on that allows for people to have kind of one-to-many interactions while also having that live feed fed into them. Kumo Space is a very similar one. And then there's other ones on here that are either platforms that can be used to deliver the live feed, or manage a overall or a larger event. So maybe it's just not the fundraising expert or fundraising experience, but maybe it's a whole conference or a series of events that you might look at, and Expo Pass might be a good place to look there. But yeah, I think what Fred said is, greater giving for a overall management platform is probably one of the best ones out there.
Yeah, and I will say that the times when I have it streamed on YouTube, it's usually because it's a fundraiser that is either industry specific. I was just in LA doing a live stream for City of Hope, which is kind of like their cancer research center down there. And they do industry specific fundraisers where they have the construction industry gets together and they raise money. And so people want the breakout rooms beforehand. They want to be able to network and socialize. And then we push them into the main room where we do our live stream, and then they go back and they continue to network. And they really don't want anybody who's not a part of that industry attending that fundraiser. Whereas when I'm doing Fair Start, they want everybody to be able to watch that fundraiser. And so that's why being on YouTube is nice. There's no software download required. If I tell my neighbor, Doug, if I tell Doug, hey, at 7 o'clock tonight, we're hosting a fundraiser for Fair Start, I'll text you the link to watch. Then he can just click the link and he's watching, And then once I've got him watching, in the broadcast, I can explain how to give and all of that. But it's so easy to just send a link. But there have been other, closed door fundraisers I've done that are private fundraisers where we've used other software solutions for sure.
And the other nice thing is there's ways to also distribute the stream to multiple locations. So you could go YouTube, Facebook, dedicated platform. The bigger the reach, I think the more that you can accomplish that way.
Yeah, you just have to be careful in this live stream world with music. Because when you play whatever song you play in the to kick off your fundraiser in a ballroom, you're not going to get a phone call from Universal Records, but online they can make you take your video down, things like that. So you have to be careful and make sure that you're getting music that's free and clear. And there are websites out there that are designed for that, and I have licenses with some of them. YouTube also has, if you Google YouTube Studio Music, you'll get their whole library of just free music you can use when you're streaming on YouTube. So it's just something to be aware of.
And just kind of wrapping up, these are our contact information. Feel free to reach out to any of us, or either Fred or I, and we're happy to have further conversations. So I guess if there's
I love talking about. I love strategy is as much fun for me. That's why when people partner with me, I have a Calendly link. Linda and I were talking about Calendly, where you have your choice, as Jason said, of Zoom or Teams, depending on what you prefer. But I love talking strategy. I think because of our backgrounds in film and television production, all of the work in the commercial is really done before you show up for that commercial shoot. And for me, fundraisers are the same thing. Like by the time I show up, we should just be executing on a plan and just having fun doing it, So I love talking strategy and timelines and technology and, procurement and donor development and board expectations and anything and everything. I just love it. I'm really passionate about all the work that goes into an event beforehand. So always happy to chat.
I love hearing from people who are so passionate about nonprofits in general and being able to help them be more successful. So thank you very much, both of you, for coming and sharing this information. As I said, we will make it public, but I do want to open up for additional questions. And before I do that, I wanted to give BC a chance to say hello. So Brian, are you there and you want to say hi? Or not?
I do.
Hi.
It just shrunk me. You asked me to introduce myself, and all of a sudden everything went boop, 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 and I lost. Yes. So I'm BC. Thank you so much, Fred and Kevin. This is a very entertaining and thought-provoking segment. Thank you for being a guest. I'm the founder of A World Empowered. So in January of 2018, I founded a nonprofit that is designed to raise money to help other nonprofits. So our motto is helping people who like helping people to help more people. So 80% of the sales of my book, all of my speaking fees and workshop fees go into the nonprofit, which I in turn donate back to other nonprofits around the world who are already doing good work. So that's the synopsis.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
so do we have other questions for Kevin and Fred? No? I
Have
thought
you-
it was really good. I don't, in my practice, I don't actually do fundraising events. I help do fundraising strategic plans for coming up with some, ideas like do these fundraisers. But if you need people to like do the fundraiser, then you need to go see someone like Fred and get Kevin on board and that kind of thing. So I'm just really excited to have you both here and to share so much really great information, and also to the attendees. And like I said, we'll have that opened up. And if there's anything else that other questions that maybe people have of me or anyone else.
Have either of you heard of betterworld.org? Kevin or Fred?
I have not. I just put, by the way, a link in the chat to the live stream, just the one I happen to be doing tonight at 7 o'clock. So if you want to actually see like what a truly live fundraiser is and you're sitting around at home tonight at 7 o'clock, that's what that is. But Brian, what was the name of the organization you said?
Betterworld.org. So they do silent auctions on a website base, and you can set the time frame. So I was just curious, if somebody were like, if I were to run an auction off of that, how would I create a sense of urgency? You said people bid when there's a sense of urgency. If you're running something through a website such as that, and it's not a live Zoom or in-person meet, how would one create a sense of urgency through something like that?
Well, typically, you know, and the same is true even of websites like eBay. You know, the spikes, the kind of two bidding spikes are when something goes live and then when something's closing. You know, like the 3 days in the middle, you don't get as much bidding. So I would just set a time, and I'm sure that they would do this too, where it's like when that auction item is going to close. Because my guess is it's akin to eBay or something like that, where
it's not dissimilar. It's just entirely free, specific
right,
for nonprofits.
right. And so yeah, so I would, I would just be very public with like emails that let people know, when the auction items are closing, to create that urgency. So that if you say like, the live auction is open today, and you want to make sure that that silent auction closes when people are still awake and bidding, so never at midnight or something,
Right.
like but if it's Thursday at 7 p.m. or something like that, or Saturday at noon or something, when you really feel like you're knowing your donors that they would be active and kind of finishing their bids, that's a good way to do it too. And then the other thing that is important, I think, I try to price my items based on what I expect that they'll sell for. So, I mean, sometimes that is the fair market value and they're the same thing. Sometimes they're not. Like if it's lunch with Russell Wilson and you know, at McDonald's, that would have a fair market value of $10, but it's going to sell for a lot more. So I usually start the pricing at like 30% of what I expect it to sell for. And then I go up in 10% increments roughly. So if I think someone's going to sell for $100, I would start it at $30 and go up $10 at a time. And that's another thing that creates urgency, is that you get a lot of early bids. And so Brian bids, and then Kevin bids, and then Linda bids, and then Fred bids. And now you've got 4 people on the hook for that one item. And so, it can be a mistake to have bid increments that start too high or that are too big themselves. So I think between that and just being clear with people of when it closes and sending an email that morning, like, 5 hours left to bid and that kind of stuff, you'll be able to create that urgency.
Like Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives and things like that.
You can do that too, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's next level, but yes, if you can do that and, hey, we're coming to you live, we're down to the final hour of our auction, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that would be fun too, for sure.
You could probably also get away with doing targeted advertising through Facebook and Instagram. So create those posts that are have that urgency or that we're closing soon, and then know what your targeted audience is and be able to design the ad campaign around that.
Perfect. May I ask
Yeah.
one more?
Go ahead, BC.
Sorry, Linda, thank you. Have you any recommendations on item acquisition? Because this is a new concept for me in the whole auction side of it. I've got things that I could personally donate, but item acquisition from other for-profit companies is something I'm just stepping into.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, I mean, like, you know, schools will have a form letter that they send to all the neighborhood businesses because there's, you know, a connection there. They know what elementary school is in their neighborhood typically. But generally speaking, I think that procurement does not mean cold calls. Generally speaking, I think it's who are you connected to? And so I always ask groups, you know, this past December, did anyone send you a holiday card? And did you send out a holiday card? And who are those people? Because if you've got 10 people on a committee and they each sent out 50 cards, that's 500 people right there that you're really tightly connected with. So much so that you sent them a card. And so who are those people? Does one of them work at a winery, or does one of them have season tickets to the Seahawks, or does one of them have a second house in Suncadia, or is one of them just a really great chef? I did at Lakeside School. There was a family that had just immigrated from India, and they were foodies, and they were putting together like an 8-course dinner that highlighted 8 different regions of India, where they would talk about why this particular food came from this region. Much like Italy, the food you have on the coast is different from what you have in the middle of the country. And so you can't get a meal like that anywhere. And that sold for a lot of money because it was so specific. So anyway, I love thinking about that. Like, who can you directly ask? Who are you connected to? And sometimes as one person works at a winery and someone else's friend is a really great cook, and a third person you know, has a waterfront house, or, you know, will get the permit for a Seattle park or whatever it is, you know, and you can kind of put together this dinner where like, oh, okay, we're going to be on the waterfront at Lincoln Park in West Seattle, and we're going to have this wine poured by the winemaker, and then this amazing home chef is cooking for you. You know, you can put together packages with multiple people too. What I love about something like that is you can't buy it the next day. You can't Google the price of, you know, like a $250 gift card to El Gaucho or Canlis is going to sell for somewhere between 250 or 350, kind of depending on how generous your people are. But that home cooked dinner, who knows what it'll go for, because you can't buy that anywhere else.
Can't put a price on it.
Things that feel VIP and exclusive like that are really fun when it, you know, when it comes to generating a lot of money. And then the other thing I try to encourage people to do is just try to go for diversity. You know, if you work in the restaurant industry and so you know 8 chefs, those 8 chef dinners are going to do fine. But I would rather have like 2 chef dinners and then 1 winemaker experience and some sports tickets and 1 local staycation and, you know, 1 piece of art and, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, diversity can also help a lot too. But I think my main takeaway is, you know, who are you connected to? Who sent you a holiday card? Who sent, you know, who, you know, that kind of thing. Like that's where I would start.
Perfect. Great advice. Thank you so much.
And I was going to say, my first experience with a silent auction app was at Realities for Children. I don't know if you attended one of their events where they were using Handbid, but what I loved about it was that I'm sitting in this was when in-person events were being done years and years ago. But I'm sitting in the event and I've got my phone with me, and, you know, I downloaded the app and I bid on some things and I'm listening to the event thing, and all of a sudden it pops up that somebody has outbid me on this item. And I'm like, you know, so I went right on, like I'm sitting at the table, like listening to the event, and I'm like bidding out people, you know, and I'm just doing it live right then and there. And I was like, no way. And it was just really cool because it was so interactive and people were like participating. It might have drawn away from the event just a little bit, but what I will say is that they made more money, because I talked to Craig about that after that event. They made more money in a silent auction than they'd ever made, because people were live responding and they were getting these updates that they'd been outbid and they wanted to participate and get those items. So yeah,
across the industry, silent auction items, again, like apples to apples, are up. you know, like, you know, meaning that $100 gift card you sold for $80 last year is selling for $100 this year, you know, for sure, for exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And people just, they're home too. It's like you don't have the distractions of being in a ballroom.
Yeah.
But live auctions, on the other hand, have dipped down, because if I do have that amazing dinner and I'm in a ballroom with people and I say, hey, Linda, right now Kevin's in the lead. You're going to be sitting at home, you know, microwaving old pizza while Kevin has this amazing dinner. Like, do you want to bid now? It's really hard online to generate the same kind of excitement and energy that you can in a live auction, which is why one piece of advice I give everyone in the hybrid world is wherever your auctioneer is, that is where you should have your big donors and your big spenders. So if you're broadcasting and you plan on having anybody in the room, I would really make sure it's the people who spend the money in the room with your auctioneer, because you know that's I can sell an auction item for twice as much in person as I can online, and so you know, anything you can do as things ease up, anything you can do to get your live auction bidders and donors in the same room as your auctioneer, do it.
Cool. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic, and I've learned so much. Fred, thank you so much for coming and
anytime.
sharing that. And Kevin, thank you for helping to put that together and being a part of this. I really, really appreciate it. And we are going to share this with all our other members that we have. This is actually a meetup group initially, but I share it with all of my clients and things like that so that they have good information, and hopefully will reach out to you if they have other questions. So
yeah, I love chatting. So reach out anytime. And Kevin, I mean, there's nobody in town who knows more about technology and how to push the limits of technology and use technology to bring people together than Kevin. So please, yeah, reach out to us.
yeah, I'm so glad that I reached out to Kevin to come and put this together for me today. And just so everyone knows, I'm really excited about Gazala next week, next month. Spread the word about next month's, because I think Gazala will have a ton of information to share.
Yeah, she's great.
It's been really neat to make this transition from Colorado, where I lived for 42 years, to Seattle, where I'm meeting people like you, Fred and Kevin. So I just, it's really neat to be here in Seattle, and there's a lot that goes on here in Seattle beyond what I learned in Colorado. But I'm really excited. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you everyone for joining. Come back and see us next month, because it's going to be a really good program. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thanks.